to this edition of Author Talk. Again, my name is Aaron, and today our guest is Eric Franklin, who is the director and founder of the Institute for the Franklin Method, based in Switzerland. He has more than 35 years experience as a dancer and choreographer. He has taught at numerous universities around the world, including Juilliard School in New York, Rutgers University, University of Vienna, the Royal Ballet School in London, and the Zurich Neurological Institute, among many others. So he's presented at numerous scientific conferences and has authored a number of books. I have a few of them here. We have Breathing for Peak Performance, Understanding the Pelvis. We have Conditioning for Dance. We have Dance Imagery for Technique and Performance, and his latest that we're going to get into a little bit more today, Dance Imagery, Dynamic Alignment through Imagery, right there. So I know he has many more books. You can find them actually on his website, many additional resources there. But again, welcome, Eric. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Okay.
If you could, for a little bit more perspective, could you give everyone a little more information about yourself and kind of how you got to where you are today?
Absolutely. So basically, I went to the University of Zurich,
okay,
where I studied biomechanics and science of movement and so forth. But then I decided I wanted to become a dancer. A bit late, you know, that's how it goes. And I ended up at NYU School of the Arts, and I did that program, graduated from there, and then I danced in New York. But I developed a bunch of aches and pains, a bit of backache, knees, and things like that. And I was thinking, well, you know, dancing is healthy, good for you. What am I doing to create these issues?
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of started me off on this path. And so the Franklin method developed very organically.
Okay.
I never had an idea to have a method or to be a teacher, but I ended up, for example, teaching at the American Dance Festival, and that was a long time ago, more than 2 decades ago. And I started making notes on all the exercises I was developing to help dancers with conditioning, with their mindset, how to use imagery to improve your performance, which now we know there wasn't much research then, really makes a difference. Alignment, of course, anatomy, I was teaching them anatomy, and then out of that, copious amounts of notes. I made a book, a huge book. I sent it off to Human Kinetics, and they wrote back, this is the true story, they said, this is too big, you know, we have to divide it into 2 books. Can you make 2 books?
Right.
So that's basically was the beginning of Dynamic Alignment Through Imagery. It was published in 1997, the first edition. And also Dance Imagery, Technique and Performance. And as far as I know, and I was told by Human Kinetics, that actually was the beginning of the somatics book series at Human Kinetics. So the whole somatics department started with Dynamic Alignment Through Imagery, and then afterwards came the yoga and the Pilates books and all those things.
Right.
So I had no plan to be doing that, but you know, that's kind of how it evolved.
Well, it looks like it's definitely worked out for you to this point. Now, I know you obviously mentioned the Franklin method. Could you, and we're going to talk a little more about alignment and imagery and get into some of those details in a little bit. But just to start off, maybe for people who aren't aware, could you kind of explain what the Franklin method is? You know, again, I guess you kind of mentioned how you established it, but why it's so beneficial.
Well, basically, the Franklin method uses, you know, mental imagery, which we have to talk about. What is that, right? And also proprioceptive techniques, studying functional anatomy to improve human function and efficiency. So it is what we call the student-centered approach. In other words, I don't come in and tell people what to do, but we collaborate on discovering what works best for each student.
Okay.
And one of the things we say and we do is let's start first with the things that have the largest effect on how we feel and move. And those are the things we are doing all the time, like posturing, breathing, right? We spend our day changing postures, and also thinking and imaging. 60,000 thoughts a day. We think about the future, the past. We plan imagery all the time. But are we using these things to our benefit? A lot of people don't. And we know that from sports. We know that from dance and so forth. So the Franklin Method, typical Franklin Method class will start with an introduction into mental imagery techniques, inner speaking, self-talk techniques, and then move on to some anatomical topic like the pelvis and so forth, which we then collaboratively discover and work on to create, best efficiency and movement qualities for that area of the body, and then of course the whole body. Okay. So, yeah.
Okay, very good. And I am very interested in, imagery and self-talk and all the things that you just mentioned there. But let's go first to the importance of alignment, and specifically, obviously, dynamic alignment, as you mentioned in the book. And I think when most people hear the word alignment, they obviously think of posture. But more specifically, what does dynamic alignment mean to you, and why is that so important?
Well, at any given moment, of course, we are unconsciously and consciously adjusting our alignment to keep our center of gravity over our base of support. And, we may trip, so we have to react to that. That's mostly unconscious. Or we have to skip across the stream, then we can do some planning related to that. But I think what we're really talking about here also is, does improving your alignment improve performance?
Okay.
Right? Can you move that? I mean, otherwise, kind of why bother with it? Does it make you feel better and so forth? Well, right. One thing is pretty clear, and everyone can do that experiment. For example, if you lift your arms and notice how flexible you feel in your shoulder, and then you take a rib circle or something and shift it, so crooked alignment, and then you lift your arms, you'll see your shoulders are stuck, less flexible. Okay. So we say your flexibility is only as good as your alignment permits. One reason to work on your alignment. Another one, to go to a completely different area, we know that people in different postures perceive their world around them, what's happening to them differently. So if you're in bad posture, you kind of interpret everything more negatively. And there's research on this. And if you're in good posture, better posture, then everything sounds a little more, positive. So there's a psychological aspect, there's a performance aspect, and that's what dynamic alignment is. But then I think it's interesting to talk about alignment from the point of view of education.
Right.
What has happened, to alignment in the world of education, exercise, teaching, dance, and there we have a lot of static alignment. Okay. In other words, the idea, if we position a person correctly, then they'll move better, or they'll not get injured and things like that. Yeah. So I think that's really the meat here. Okay. And what we have to look at. Yeah.
All right. So what are some of the biggest issues, or I guess biggest scenarios that you see when you have people come into your class or come into your sessions? What are some of the things that you see most often in terms of alignment and posture?
Right. So basically, we have different things we say, like little buzzwords to help people understand what is dynamic alignment. And one, of course, is the base posture is the next posture. Humans are not very good at staying in a position. Right? We're not designed for that. So anyone who just stands there, if you want to stand, you're going to feel that you have postural sway. You're basically always falling over and catching yourself. And then I do an experiment, and you're all invited to try that. Try to just stay centered. That word centered. Everyone stay centered, totally aligned. Don't move. Like stay in that perfect spot and stay there for a minute. And it's not going to feel comfortable. Right. Because the body doesn't want to do that for a bunch of reasons. First of all, if you were able to stay in exactly the same position, this perfect alignment, then basically the same groups of muscles, the same muscle fibers, the same motor unit, the same neurons would have to keep firing, and you would be exhausted very fast. And also the same areas of a joint, like points on your cartilage, would be compressed. Cartilage can't handle that. So it's not good for us to do that. Okay. But my experience early on in dance, and I was constantly being positioned, and if you find the right position, then everything's good. And position is good from a point of view of aesthetics. So if you want to do a certain movement in dance, like an arabesque or a certain position in yoga, Pilates, that's fine. We're not talking about not doing the aesthetic.
Okay.
But can we do that aesthetic dynamically and functionally? That, of course, is the question. And just to finish this part, is what I see, and it's still happening very much, it's sort of like the idea of alignment, stability, is about reducing movement or staying in a position.
Okay.
And biomechanically, we know that does not work. Right. Human stability needs movement. For force absorption, damping, load transfer, all those things. So, yeah, we still have a lot of work to do in the world of dynamic alignment.
I think that's so interesting because one of the first things that I thought of when you were explaining all that is when maybe a parent tells a young kid to sit still, and like they physically shouldn't sit still or they can't sit still. I mean, there are a number of other reasons why they're probably acting up and moving around. But no, that's really interesting. That I guess the aspect of it's not super healthy to stay in one position for an extra long time there. So great stuff there for sure.
One good example of that is people with back pain,
Okay.
Do people with back pain move more or less? They reduce their movement, so they have less movement variability. So they have less movement variability, and now they're being taught sometimes to, okay, let's find the correct position for you when they're already not varying their movement enough. That group should say, okay, you should start like moving with more variation. Remember that when you were a child, every day a new movement like that. So, yeah, exactly. The child example, and I used to work in schools, also with children, and looking at how can you get more movement into the classroom. And we actually saw that it improved math skills.
Oh, wow.
To have the kids do, math and movement at the same time. Yeah.
Very interesting. So one of the things that I took from there, then you mentioned the person with the back pain. It's kind of like if you that you need to go work out or exercise, but you're having a little bit of pain. A lot of people end up feeling better afterwards, and I think that's probably, and to your point, that they are getting in more movement. They are moving around a little bit, and that's helping that back pain. Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah.
From what you said?
Yes, exactly. Well, people always want to know what prevents back pain. Well, exercise, any kind of exercise prevents back pain, right?
Right.
If you move, you will tend to have less back pain. But the problem is when people have back pain, they are automatically, for protective reasons, reducing their movement, but that reduction in movement in itself can become a problem. So, yeah. And I mean, there's two aspects to dynamic alignment. So if I shift my weight from 2 feet to 1 feet, I have to navigate my center of gravity from a larger, base of support to a smaller base of support. So that requires a lot of counterbalancing in the spine, in different places like that for that to work. And someone who moves well is very good at doing that, taking their center of gravity efficiently from one base of support to the next.
Okay.
However, if they are thinking, oh, but I have to maintain this position of my pelvis and this position of my spine and the shoulder has to be aligned like this, it's much harder to do.
Yeah.
Because moving means changing position. So basically you have to reinvent your optimal alignment in every moment. You can't keep the alignment of one position and try to use it for the next position. It simply does not work. Another example would be, if you lift your arms, the last 10 degrees of lifting your arms is spinal extension.
Right.
And 15 degrees. But if someone said, oh, now I found my, words are used like neutral spine, which I don't think is bad, but if you think that it's a fixed thing, so I'm going to keep my neutral spine and lift my arms, you just won't have the flexibility because you need to change your spine. Even more so if you lift one arm, then there's some counterbalancing in the spine. So dynamically you have to allow the spine to counterbalance the arm. There's even some rotation in the torso to counterbalance the arm. Okay. So there's a lot of movement going on, and you will actually look more aligned if you allow that movement to happen.
Very interesting perspective. I think that's something that we all might think of subconsciously, but don't think about all the nuances and everything that goes on with that alignment. So I do want to get to the mental imagery that you mentioned. I guess I think this is a really interesting component to everything that you've mentioned so far. So could you first start by explaining what mental imagery is?
Okay,
for people that might not know.
Something, once you kind of like, it sinks in. So it's pretty exciting. So we humans and you know, are able to really very well at a high skill level generate sensory perceptions in our head that affect how we feel and move. Okay. So for example, if I say, I just imagine my joints are, you know, well oiled and, you know, imagine them to be flexible, I immediately will be more flexible in my shoulders. You're welcome to try it. Than if you imagine your shoulders are stuck and the muscles are tight and everything's great. Right. Immediately. So the fastest way to change your movement is to change your mind about the movement.
Okay. That's interesting. Yeah.
And it's not the only way. It's, you know, it's not always the right for everyone like that, but it certainly is the fastest. And it's a skill that's free. It's always available. Right. You can apply it to any kind of exercise system, to any kind of pathology. Why not use it more? And of course, it's good to have a little training in it because there's all kinds. So there's anatomical imagery, metaphorical imagery. Yeah. So it's basically creating a sensory perception, a metaphor, for example. I have a string attached to my head, pulling me up gently like that. There is no string, you know. I created that idea. Boom. Right. You know. Or my shoulders are melting like ice cream. They're not ice cream. So I generated these perceptions in my head to create a relaxing effect. So a built-in tool that I think we should use more. Yeah.
I think that's so important to, I guess, something very important for everyone to consider, especially if they're having issues with, you know, with their movement, with their posture and everything that you just talked about there. I like that there's a section in the book that, I mean, it kind of has very specific descriptions or almost sample scripts that you can go through. And I think that's, especially for someone that's not familiar with this, that's something that they can read through and kind of get a really good idea of how to incorporate that on their own. But how, so I guess take us through an example. If you had someone in one of your sessions, how would you kind of walk them through that? And what would that look like?
Well, a typical class starts with just increasing proprioception awareness. So you tap the body like this and you shake and you, just like an athlete would do before a race.
Sure.
Yeah. Then the second thing, you know, there's a step-by-step introduction to, you know, mind, body, mind, you could call that as well, right? So the first thing is we just stand there and feel our body, see if we can feel and not think about stuff. And I explained, well, if you want to improve movement, the first thing is you have to know what's going on in the moment that needs improvement. If you're not present, obviously you're not aware.
Sure.
So step number one is always, where am I at? And step number two is, what do I want? Right? Okay. So let's say I want, you know, better hip flexion. Okay. That's the goal in the class. And then we start with, okay, ask everyone, take your fingers and point to your hip joints, and you'd be surprised. So many people don't know where their hip joints are. Problem number one, right? And this goes into the world of body schema. So your ability to imagine your body. We know that if you can imagine your body more clearly, you move better. Just that, yeah. And we've done studies with people with Parkinson's and shown that in that population as well. So we learn about the hip joint, we visualize the hip joint, we see where it is, and already we're going to be more flexible just after that. And then we discover the dynamic movement of the pelvis, sacroiliac joint, how that works. We use touch, imagery, you know, how the sit bones, the ischial tuberosities move, how the sacrum moves. And people, 99% of the case, will be more flexible, and also their back will be more released. So brief introduction to mental imagery. Just remind everyone some examples, and then you go into the topic, for example, freeing up your hips. And then you use a variety of anatomical and metaphorical imagery techniques to get that going, but interactive. So I don't just say, this is the image you have to use now. No, we discover what works best for that specific person.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is there a lot of back and forth then between you and the client, you know, just kind of figuring out what works best for them? Because you said it's not
exactly
kind of a blanket idea.
Exactly, because we know that from many areas now, also more and more in the area of back pain, that if the client or the student is more educated and there's more interaction, you get faster results. I mean, that's a slam dunk, right?
Right.
So there's always some interaction going on, and figuring out what imagery works best in the moment. You know, some people are more visual, some are more kinesthetic, and so forth. So you're finding what kind of imagery works best for that individual person. And it's also, with posture. So I don't just come in and correct posture, like, oh, this has to go back, that has to go forward, and telling people, oh, that shoulder has to go up, because it makes people feel wrong. Oh, this is, what else is wrong? And that's not helpful for movement. Right? If you think, oh, this is too tight,
right.
No. So we do processes where afterwards we ask, okay, do you feel more comfortable now, more aligned? And people will feel more aligned. I mean, all you need to do, for example, is tap your shoulder like that a little bit, because you're improving proprioception, reducing viscosity in the muscles. So tap a little bit, and then you go, is the shoulder more flexible? Yes. And then people go, oh, I had the experience of more flexibility. I now know what it is. Instead of saying, you have to become more flexible in your shoulder now, right?
Right.
So instead of telling the client always what to do, give them the experience of what you're talking about.
And maybe you can speak to this then too. It sounds like the method and the approach that you take is really helping people become more comfortable and more familiar with their bodies, so that they're able to move, I guess, more freely. I guess
exactly.
That's
more
what I say.
More body, able to move more freely. And then the next level, we do conditioning. So I use bands and balls, and once you have the system more organized, then I build obviously more strength into that system using a variety of just body movement, or often we use bands or other props like that. Yeah. So well, conditioning aspect as well. Yeah.
Okay. What are some of the reactions that you get from people once they realize that, they're kind of, it sounds like tapping into their inner self, like really kind of learning what works for their own body, and it's not just someone kind of demanding that they do certain things?
Yeah, well, you get very many positively surprising reactions, and also because it's a very conservative approach. I'm not manipulating anything. They're doing the work basically, and I'm their coach. For example, I was doing this webinar the other day on the core, reimagining the core, right? Big topic. And we were looking at, so just constantly fixing someone and trying to get them like that, it limited. It can make people feel uncomfortable. So what about if we imagine our vertebrae nicely aligned, like stacked on top of each other, and just imagine them more aligned and, comfortably, that you have the psoas in front, the rectus spine in back, multifida, if you know the muscles, just like nicely cushioned and supported and aligned. Right. Everyone felt more flexible in their hip, more comfortable in their back. And then let's compare it to imagining, just to test, are we imagining things? Imagine your vertebrae not to be aligned, like all crooked and stuff like that. Yeah. And then everyone felt less flexible, less comfortable. So it's really powerful, just even imagining that proper alignment. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I think that speaks to the power of imagery and what you can really do with it. Just to kind of get over some of those hurdles that you might be going through. Another important aspect that I want to kind of get to that can probably tie all of this together is breathing. I mean, that sounds kind of obvious to some people, I think. We breathe every day, like it's kind of natural, but I think it's kind of a deeper topic than what people really think of, in terms of I guess, having yourself breathe a certain way, or just to kind of maybe release some tension or whatnot. So can you kind of speak to that and kind of the importance of breathing in that respect?
Absolutely. Well, obviously super important, not just for energy, but also psychologically. So if you're not breathing deeply, like it's just related to stress, and we know that stress is related to inflammation and so forth. So it's a huge thing. And I started creating a breathing class, you know, more than 2 decades ago. And it's sort of what motivated me is like, okay, you go to the gym and, you know, okay, there's the lat pull down, there's the biceps and all these machines for all these things. And then I'm going, but what about the diaphragm, the most important breathing muscle? Where's that exercise machine for nothing, right? And there's really only 2 muscles, heart and diaphragm, that if they don't work, you're gone, you know?
Yeah.
Those are the 2 most important ones, right? So where's that?
Fair point.
Nothing. So I started developing, okay, exercise first to free up the diaphragm and then to stretch the diaphragm.
Okay.
And so how do you stretch the diaphragm and then feel the differences? So we do it through movement. We do it when you exhale, the diaphragm lengthens. So, and then people feel huge differences and they're much calmer in their head and so forth. So, but again, I don't start by telling people what to do, but we start what we call with, where are you at with that topic? For example, okay, where do you think your diaphragm, most important breathing muscle, is located? And then everyone says where it is. And then we find out where it is. And then, okay, does it move up or down when you inhale? You'd be surprised how many people, right? Because it feels like up, but it goes down. Okay, is it lengthening or shortening? Now we're already getting into like, is it lengthening or shortening when we inhale?
Yeah.
And how are you going to work with a muscle if you don't know when it lengthens and shortens? Right?
Fair point.
So we go like that, and then we do okay, and then we do imagery exercises. When you inhale, it shortens. When you exhale, it lengthens. You practice that, work with the antagonistic muscles, TA, and so on. You slowly build this building of increased awareness of how this all collaborates, and we notice how it improves alignment, flexibility, mental well-being, and so forth. So yeah, hugely, hugely important. And there's a huge chapter on breathing, dynamic alignment, the whole thing is in there. Yeah,
definitely. So I think that well, first of all, this has been a very interesting conversation. I want to be respectful of your time. I know we also have a time difference that we're working through here. It's kind of still midday for us here, kind of later in the day for you. But I definitely appreciate your time. I know that a lot of people were able to take quite a bit from this conversation. So if you haven't checked out Eric's books, definitely check them out. They're on our website, us.humankinetics.com. There, he has that one there, dynamic alignment through imagery. I will tell you, we only barely touched on a lot of the things that you're going to find in that book. So definitely take advantage of that, get your copy. He also has his website. I'll let him talk about again here. So I will give you the last word here, kind of tell everyone how they can keep up with all the great things that you're doing and continue learning from you.
Exactly. Well, of course, the book and the other books. Right. And I also have webinars, online courses, teacher trainings, and so forth. Just go to franklinmethod.com and you'll find all of that. And yeah, check it out. Take a shorter course first and then you can graduate to something longer. And of course, you can write us, with your questions and your requests, and gladly help you out with whatever you would like to learn.